Hey, lovely people, how you doing? Thank you for tuning in again. I got a really strong message about this one about peace. So I hope this really resonates with all of you guys. Shall we get started? Let's do it. I really thought this week I was going to be talking about about belief, but I entered a ceremony and Spirit really spoke to me, and Spirit said to me, we need to send out the message of peace. Especially in these uncertain times, people need to understand the depths of peace. And then she started to really show me and make me understand the message that needs to come across to you guys. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's do this. There's a couple of things about peace. There's the understanding of the way we use peace in society at the moment, in our lives currently, and where those teachings are really coming from for us. Have we really gotten to know peace in a really in-depth way? And there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of understanding. I feel that we need to. There's a lot of understandings about peace we need to learn. And the second part of this, we're going to start to talk about peace in a much more deeper way with a few examples, so we can start to really understand these parts of what we're born with. And that leads me to really the beginning of all of what I really want to talk about, because there's the fundamental principles of spirituality. To really understand ourselves, really to understand who and what we are, is to understand we're not just human born on this planet and we go to work and we do these things. It's not really that way. The truth is, you're a sentient being. You are a finely tuned biological piece of work. You are 70% water with a whole electrical system inside you that's beaming out waves of energy. And it's not just a transponder. It's not just like we beam out this, but also we're a receiver. We receive energy and understanding. And there's a lot of studies being done in this. There was one in the UK that was done in 1980 something, by Royal Mail actually, which showed that 84% of communication is by body language, and only 16% is done by what you actually really say. The rest is all by vibration, really. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but the truth is, it's what you're feeling. It's what the other person is really saying and how you are responding to that. And it's so true. It's so true. And the fundamentals of spiritualism really encapsulate this, because there's three things you're born with. Three things. And the first one is heart, is love. You're born with love. You're able to love. You are able to do that through your heart, or what we call the heart. But it's allowing every single part of you to be vulnerable. Like when you first fall in love. When you first fall in love, no matter what that partner's saying, you're gonna just accept it, because you're in the vibration of love. And from that vibration of love, you're open. You're open to any possibility. You're high because you're in the vibration of love, in a very unconditional way. And it's important to remember this, because we're going to talk about this later, because when you're in those vibrations of love where everything is unconditional, you are also furthest away from things like denial. Because denial is an understanding of the opposite of denial is not being aware. The opposite of denial is consideration. When you are with an open heart, you are able to consider anything. That's why in the first moments of falling in love with someone, it doesn't matter what they say, because you will accept it, because you will consider it, because your heart is open. And so in this way, we have to understand love. The second part of what you're born with is the light. You're born with really sacred, a really strong, imagine a white beam, a light that comes from space, from consciousness, from everything that's living around you, and it comes inside you. And imagine that light just shining through your body. This is understanding your connection with consciousness, but also understanding the connection with yourself. It's understanding you are a part of that light. You are a part of consciousness, and part of her lives inside you. And that is part of your consciousness. When we die, that consciousness goes back to where it came from. And so the light is to understand the relationship you have with the light, the spirit that resides inside you, and the connection of that to consciousness. And it's a really, really strong concept, understanding, feeling, because this is where your will comes from. When we want to get something done and we're like, nope, doesn't matter if I'm tired, I'm going to do this. It's that light, it's the strength of that light that brings the will that allows you to do it. It's not your mind. There's a little bit of your mind, but it's a lot of this understanding. And the third part is understanding peace. You're born with peace. And it's not something that we create. It's not something that we attain through life. You're born with peace. And it's really important to understand this, guys, because that peace allows you to understand harmony. It allows you to understand balance. And when something doesn't feel right in your life, it's usually because that peace is getting disrupted. It's getting disrupted because the balance, the harmony is telling you, something's not right here. And the first thing we got to do before we shoot off our mouth or go and take some action of something is to make sure that the light and the heart are completely exactly where they need to be. That the light is really connected, you're connected to your spirit and consciousness, that your heart is really open and you're receptive to consideration. Because if you don't have those two in balance, in check, completely in the right way, then it's gonna disrupt the peace and the harmony. So really the peace and the balance it gives you through harmony is telling you that something is wrong somewhere. Yeah, it's really, really interesting to, it's really good that you consider this. It's really good that you start to understand this, because these are the fundamentals of what you're born with. These are the fundamental principles of what we are born with, but what we should always live with. We should live this way. And we have been born into a society that gives us many tests. And it's a rocky road. I know for some of you in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of tests that you guys have already gone through. And when I first went to Zimbabwe and I met the people there, I was really astonished, because people are so happy. They're so grateful for what they have because they've been through so much. And so every day is like, every day you wake up in Zimbabwe, it's like you're grateful for another day. It's a really beautiful thing. Whereas in England, sometimes the energy is a bit heavier because we're spoiled. We got a social system, a welfare system that we depend on to look after us. Instead of taking the onus on ourselves to really allowing ourselves to bring peace and gratefulness and harmony and love to our lives, like we're depending on somebody else to do it for us. So we're kind of a bit spoilt in England. So it's these understandings, these principles of understanding your peace, your light, your love, in a way that they will show you what's really going on. So let's get to it. Let's talk about peace. Because as I was saying, we have our understanding of peace is completely different. The way we have peace in our lives these days is like we're using it. We're using peace like we want to get home, put the bag down, put everything down, get everything done so we can have maybe a glass of wine and we can sit there and we can be like, okay, this is my time, I'm going to take this is my peace. And we're really using peace that way. And it's really, we have to be careful doing that. We have to be really careful because what we're doing is we're understanding peace the wrong way. More than that, we're manifesting this even more into our life by allowing these cycles of using things like peace. So maybe it's going to be a piece of chocolate for some of you. Maybe it's going to be a meal. We're trying to create something that already resides in us. What we really need to be doing in that moment is looking around and going, why don't I have this all the time? And the truth is because if we start to live that way, we're going to have to make a lot of changes. So we're sacrificing. We're trying to exchange this peace and justify all this other stuff that we have in our life. And we got to start to really bring balance to all of that. There's a second part of this that I wanted to talk about, which is understanding the phrase, I'll do anything for a bit of peace in my life. And it's like it's a commodity. And we got to stop thinking peace is a commodity. It's not a commodity. You own it. It's yours. Nobody's ever going to take it away from you. Nobody can ever take it away from you. So stop trying to exchange it. There's a phrase that goes, there's the understanding of when I was talking about denial a minute ago. It's also on the lines of understanding peace. Because when we say things like, we don't want to know things because it's going to affect our peace. Like, I don't want to know, like someone's talking to you about maybe how the world's going to be destroyed and it's going to go to shit right now and we're all going to die or we're all going to get infected. And we're like, you know what? I don't want to know. Don't want to know. No, because it's affecting your peace. And on some level, I can understand that. But the truth is, if we really don't know the depths of peace that reside in us, we can't be saying things like this, because the truth is everything from that place of peace should be allowed to flow. We should be able to see everything and read everything, hear everything. Everyone's got to say from this place. So what we're doing is we're using peace in a way to deny things in our life. Whether it's someone's going to tell you about their problems, or whether it's going to be understanding what's going on in the world right now and you got enough stress and pressure. Really what you're saying is, I got a lot of stress and pressure and so I can't take on any more because maybe I've forgotten or never knew the ways of peace. And this is to understand those. To understand peace is already inside you. When we say things like, look, I don't want to know, because it's gonna affect my peace. The truth of that statement really is that you've stopped considering stuff, and in that moment, your heart is closed. And I know that sounds hard, but it's the truth. We have to really open our hearts again. Remember that peace is out of harmony because either the light or the love is closed. There's a disconnection, and it's up to us to go down to those places and really feel, really see what part of that is really where are we not connecting? What are we not connecting to? So it's really, really important. So here we go. So we know about light, we know about love, we know about peace. We're starting to understand how and the ways in which we use peace in our life. Maybe we need to go and make some changes. Maybe we need to make some changes in our life that are going to allow us to have a greater sense of peace. And this next part we're going to talk about is the example of understanding depths of peace. Well, how can I really know how I should be vibrating peace through my life if I don't have a deeper understanding and concept of it? Well, let's give you an example, because history is always showing us peace. And there was a civilization called the Native Indians. There still is. And the Native Indians, they grew up understanding these basic principles of light, of love, of peace. And actually, these stories that I tell you, these metaphors that I share with you, they are also in the understanding of the Native Indian people. The way the Native Indian people would sit around, they didn't have TVs back in those days. They didn't have a radio, and what they would do is the grandfathers would sit around the fire with the children, and they would share these stories. They would share these stories with the children, and the children would understand through the metaphors these deeper understandings of things like belief and peace and love and light and hope. And so it's a really, really beautiful way of life. The Native Indians used to have a really beautiful way of life. In actual fact, what happened when you were born, you would spend the first 7 years of your life with your mother. So she would breastfeed you, then you'd become a toddler, you'd be crawling around, she would feed you, you'd start walking, she'd take you with her. Maybe she was going to pick some corn or some flowers. Maybe she's going to be in the kitchen. You would be with all the aunts and the grandmothers and the sisters. The first 7 years of your life you would spend in nurture, in maternal nurture with your mother. You would understand the depths of unconditional love and compassion. And it's a really beautiful way of life, because what you learn those first 7 years is nurture, is love. And after those 7 years, then at that point, you're starting to reach a stage of awareness, starting to come to those years of puberty. And so then your father would take over at that point. And you've understood nurture, now you understand survival. So you would understand hunting and gathering. So maybe you would learn to make bows, arrows, traps. You would learn how to hunt. You would learn how to make a fire. You would learn survival skills. So you learn the balance of life. And all of this was done in an understanding of nature. You would learn how to rear cattle. And they used to have a lot of cattle back in the day. And when you had cattle, before you slaughtered any cattle, you would have a ceremony back in the days. And you would have a ceremony, and then you would slaughter that cattle, and you would use every single part of it, because they knew to take a life was a really sacred thing. And they would give thanks. They would give thanks to consciousness, to Mother Earth, for taking this life. And they would honor that animal by using every single part, not just the flesh, but the skins and also the bones. And from those bones, they would make spoons or utensils or needles or lots of different things. So it's an understanding of sacredness, respect, honor. There's always tradition around these things, but the truth, the essence of all of this is that light, that consciousness, and the sacredness, that sacredness. These are the essences of the truth of understanding spirituality. So there were these great people called the Native Indians, and they had a way of life that was really in a way that would complement Mother Nature, would complement the earth that we live on. And then one day their patience would be tested, because one day came conquerors and barbarians, quite frankly, onto the lands of what is now the United States. And those people weren't really in a considering a vibration, in a considering, they weren't there to consider life in the way of Native Indians. They were there in a way that was to take what they could and to completely destroy a civilization. And what happened to the Native American people is that the women and children were raped and pillaged. Their cattle were slaughtered. Their tents were burnt. Their whole life as they knew it was destroyed. The young people were given alcohol and they went wayward. I'm a strong believer in alcohol is not your friend, not in the way that we know alcohol in society these days. And maybe one day I'm going to talk about that on one of these messages from medicine. And after all that was done, after this civilization was almost decimated, they gave them blankets as well in the middle of all of this. They gave them blankets with smallpox. And they infected the rest of whoever was there with this virus. And people died. People died in great numbers. They had no home. They were kicked off their lands after fighting and dying. Their animals were slaughtered. They had lost women and children and men. And at the end of all of that, they had to find peace. They had to find peace. And how were they going to do that? How do you find peace in a challenging time like that, when everything you know has been taken from you? Everything. Every single thing. Everything you know has been destroyed. Almost. But they understood the values. The esoteric values of life. And these are the things that really save them. Because when you start to understand light, and when you start to understand love, and when you start to understand peace in a really deep way, you start to understand nobody can take these from you no matter what happens. No matter what happens. They knew that it's really easy in this moment to close your heart. To close your heart and get really angry and start to create a whole bunch of unnecessary emotion and energy that's going to take you down a black hole. It's going to consume you. So what they did is they left their hearts open. And when you have your heart open, you are vulnerable. You're so vulnerable that it allows emotions to pass through you. And so they allowed grief to pass through them. Their light was so strong with the belief in God, in consciousness, and they were so close to their spirit that that will of the spirit allowed them and gave them strength. It gave them strength to have their heart open, to keep their heart open no matter what was happening. And they were able to do that so that they could let this grief go, and that allowed them not to live in denial, like we were talking about earlier, but to live in consideration. They were able to consider everything because their heart was open. They were trying to repair their peace. They had the strength of their light. They had their heart and consideration open, and they were able to look at these people, these barbarians. They were able to look in the face of death, and make peace with it. These are the understandings of the depths of peace. To understand that these three things nobody can take away from you. To understand the depths of peace this way saved an entire nation. It saved them from battling, going to war anymore. It allowed them to say, you want this land, take it. It allowed them to move on with life. It allowed them to move on with the understanding of still keeping the teachings and traditions they had, that they still pass on to their grandchildren, to their children and their children's children. So these are the deeper understandings of peace. To understand peace in a way that you can look clearly with strength from your light, look clearly through your heart and start to consider what's really happening. Because it starts to show you. It starts to show you these people that are coming to the lands who want to take all this land and want to take away our way of life. They're not coming from a place of consideration. And when someone's not coming from a place of consideration, it's because their heart is closed. And we can go more down that rabbit hole and we can start to understand maybe their heart was closed because they had a bad experience somewhere. Maybe it was their mother, maybe it was their father or a teacher, or maybe they were just told to do this and something killed their soul. Something killed the connection to consciousness they had, took them out of balance, and here they are in a state of greed and taking, insecurity. Greed is born from insecurity, and insecurity is born from a closed heart that's not considering. And that's all you really need to know about greed and insecurity. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole much more. When you're faced with insecurity in your life, know that the last thing you want to do is close your heart, because it's going to take you on a whirlwind journey and consume you. The best thing you can do when you're met with insecurity is keep your heart open. Keep your heart open. Allow yourself to consider. Live your life in a place that exudes peace. Peace is your state. It's your fundamental right. It's your fundamental state. Change your life so you're not trying to exchange parts of it with peace, and that you're not using peace. Allow peace to be your vibration. Allow the foundations of that to be light, and the strength of the light of your spirit and the connection you have of that spirit to consciousness. And let your heart be open like you're in love with everything, that you're vulnerable with everything. And allow that to flow, because it allows emotions to flow through you, like grief. You can't hold on to grief. You always have to let it go, because it will consume you. Grief can become a tool that we use to exact something, to make something an example of. And we can't do that. We always have to let grief go. And that comes from an open heart. So understand the foundations of the light, understand the foundations of an open heart, and that's going to allow you to have peace in your life. And that peace is connected to harmony. And that harmony, the balance of that harmony, is two scales. And when these scales start getting a bit tipsy, then you know your peace is being affected. And then we have to just check our light, we have to check our love, and make sure those two are open. These times we live in are uncertain. And it's really important we start to really breathe the understanding of this kind of peace in our life, because in these moments we're really going to need it. I hope you really, really understand and resonate with this message. Thank you for listening. I love you all. Peace. Peace out. Take care.